Hi, everyone. Hi, Layers. I'm Wendy Chien, and I'm really happy to be here. It's such a chill, relaxed conference with such cool people, so thanks so much for having me. I'm an artist and a product designer, and I also help iOS developers with their Apple strategy, helping with release strategy and product stuff. And I'm sure a lot of you here would like to hear me talk about that. I'm not going to talk about that at all today. I'm going to talk about knots, basically. So for a little bit of context, I thought I would show you about some of the work that I've been doing recently. I've been making art for about 2 to 3 years, ever since I left Apple. So I'm a wood carver. I like to carve wooden spoons by hand. I designed a pendant lamp made out of rope, and I'm lucky enough to get to install it in various restaurants, other kinds of rope installations. These are the startup offices of AngelList. It's their lounge. So working with rope in all different kinds of ways, making private work for private clients, making sculptures out of rope. And oh yeah, I have this great project that I'm calling the Year of Knots, where I'm making one knot every day in 2016. And we'll talk more about that later. So I don't usually sum up my life in overarching themes like a perfectly constructed TED Talk. In fact, on the other hand, I'm very good at focusing on what's in front of me and what I'm passionate about very intensely and diving deep. And so that's what I tend to do. But when Jessie invited me to speak today, the way that she brought it up was she started asking me a lot of questions. And I realized that I get these questions a lot, so I thought I would address some of those. And she was asking me, how many lives have you led? And how is it that you went from a record store to Apple Computer, and now you're just making art all of the time? So I thought I would talk a little bit about that. And as I thought about it, I realized that a theme that has run through my decision-making around moving to taking big leaps from one life to another life has been that I have given myself permission. And that might sound like kind of a small thing, but I think it's not, because nobody else is going to give you permission, right? So sometimes when you make something that feels like a counterintuitive change, you have to give yourself permission to do that. So today I'd just like to give you 3 really brief examples of how giving myself permission enabled me to move through life. So it all started back in the late 80s, early 90s with Aquarius Records. So Aquarius Records is one of a handful of kind of legendary, very small, started in the 70s, before my time, record stores that are pretty well acknowledged to have been very influential, tastemaker stores. So I spent 14 years there. And in the 90s and the early 2000s, if you were into music, then the record store was the center of the community. It was where you went to find your friends. It was where you went to hear what people were listening to and to find your next favorite record, to see what people were writing about. It was where you went to find out about shows. So record stores were the center of my community. And I like to think Aquarius was extra special. In addition to having pretty deep expertise in your standard punk and indie rock, we were also really into promoting genres. I'll just name a few of my favorites: Ethiopian jazz, Brazilian tropicalia, Japanese noise, and one of my favorites, Norwegian black metal. Anyone? Anyone? Yeah! This is the King of Hell from the band Gorgoroth. Just thought it'd be nice to have that up for a minute. So I'm a natural evangelist for the things that I love. It's what comes naturally to me. So I felt like it was my job at the record store to create the container for this community, right? It was for me and all of my friends and the worldwide community of music lovers. And the creative satisfaction I got from it was creating the space where that happened. And it was great. But after 14 years, I was feeling a little restless. I really wanted to know how the rest of the world lived. I felt like I had done what I set out to do, and after 14 years, I didn't really know what was going to come next, but I knew that I wanted to go. But it was really hard to leave a a career in which I had been perceived to have been very successful, and this was my community, and it was my whole identity. I was Wendy from Aquarius Records. People would call me the Queen of Valencia Street, and I really didn't know who I was going to be away from the record store, so it was scary. But finally, I decided I was just going to give myself permission to leave my identity, and that was hard, but I did it. So then I was just Wendy Chien. And so then I found Apple. I was at Apple for 8 years, and these were the very early years of iTunes and the App Store. So I spent 5 years managing various aspects of product at iTunes. I debuted the iTunes Essentials brand and other various music-related promotions throughout the store. Was there through the period of explosive growth where we added movies, TV, iBooks, podcasts, et cetera. And then my final 3 years there, I jumped over to the App Store to build and manage the editorial team. And the editorial team is the team that's responsible for finding and promoting the best apps in the App Store on the front pages of the store on a week-to-week basis. So I did that for 3 years. And again, it was great work. Some of the smartest people I've ever met, I got to work next to every day. I was promoting, again, the natural evangelist was coming out of me, so I got to promote the work that I really loved. And make no mistake, I think that what you guys do as iOS app developers and designers is absolutely art, especially in the realm of games. I think that what you're doing is art and that you're really pushing the medium forward, and I have so much respect for what you do. But after 8 years there, I realized that I had changed as a person, and I had become someone different by the time I hit my 40s. So evangelizing other people's work that felt very satisfying in my 20s and 30s was not satisfying to me anymore. And increasingly, I'll just be frank, I just wanted it to be about me, me, me. And I wanted to nurture my own creativity that I had never felt like I was allowed to do before or had time to do. Yeah, so it was hard to leave the security of that. How does this move? No, it doesn't move. Yeah, so the example of having to give myself permission at that time was that I had to give myself permission to leave that security, to forego the security of, you know, fancy paycheck, prestigious job, the approval of my friends and family, and leaving a great company. But at the end of the day, I did it. So I gave myself permission to leave Apple, and that was 3 years ago. So I took some time off. I immediately traveled around the world, and as soon as I got back, I decided that I wanted to work with my hands, because that was the thing you don't do when you're typing all day long. I guess that is with your hands, but not really, right? So I wanted to work with my hands. So I decided I was just going to take every class, a class in every single thing I'd even ever been slightly interested in. So I took everything from ceramics to interior design and LED lighting and stone carving, you name it, I took the class. And it was fun. And the only two things that really stuck with me quite immediately and struck a chord were woodworking and working in macrame, which is a form of square knotting with rope. And I guess it's actually not that big of a surprise, because my father had been a woodworker and my mom had taught me macrame back in the 70s. But those skills and my passion for those deeply held loves had just lain dormant for the rest of my career while I was promoting other people's work, having a great time, but other people's work. So as soon as I said that it was going to be all about me, and I was going to start nurturing my own creativity, rope and wood, who knew? So in a way, when I think about giving myself permission now, what I've done is I've given myself permission to be creative on a daily basis and to say that's the most important thing to me. And again, it's not such a small thing to say that I'm going to forego the other things and just be all about art now. So what my life looks like now is that I'm completely driven by aesthetics and by curiosity and by the things that I'm passionate about. I'm not working on anyone else's projects but the ones that I think are right for me. I'm not driven by money or security or the approval of others. And yeah, I'm making a new knot every day. Oh, let me say some other things. So on a daily basis, part of what my day might look like, it's always different, and I love that too, that it's never the same. So you might find me teaching a spoon carving class, or meeting at a construction site to meet architects and lighting designers. at a new condo development. You might find me working with a new startup on their iOS product and launch strategy. All those kinds of things are my daily life now. It's always different, and I love it. And that brings me to the year of knots. So I'm making a new knot every day in 2014. 2016, what year is it? In 2016. This is just an example of some of them. And I'm so in love with this project, and it feeds me in many ways. I'd like to list 4 ways that it feeds me. So 1, it feeds me because it's a daily ritual. I've never been very good at forming good habits, and I have finally with this one. So the second I get into the studio every day, the first thing I do is make a knot. Is make a knot. So it's a daily ritual of discovery and delight, and it allows me to very quickly access that elusive, fantastic flow state that I had always read about and didn't really know what that felt like. So I can access that flow state really quickly now. So it's such a gift. And the knots are also, for me, the second thing is that they're kind of my art school. So I never went to art school myself. So in a very elemental way, they are teaching me about the building blocks of art. And these are such simple concepts as line and shape, color, texture, etc. Another thing they do is they're teaching me about the history and utility of knots, so it's a history lesson. This is just a short list of some of the different types of knots. These are some of the families, but there's subfamilies and sub-subfamilies. And behind each of these single terms here, there are hundreds of different knots. So learning about the history of knots, like, it is really true. It all comes from the seafaring tradition, sailors and mariners. And a lot of the decorative knotting tradition comes from Korea, Japan, and China. So learning about that is kind of like learning a new language. And that's kind of the 4th thing that I wanted to mention is learning the knots is literally like learning a new language for me. Every time I make a new knot, it's like learning a new letter in a different alphabet. And when you have those letters, you can create words. And then when you have words, then you have a new form of communication, right? So this is the first time in my life when I'm making objects that I feel, I'm making physical objects that allow me a new way to communicate. And that's hugely valuable to me. So I'm really loving it. So, individually, the knots themselves aren't necessarily profound, but for me, the journey to the knots was. It's been a journey of giving myself permission. And so what I hope that you guys can take from this today is to give yourself permission. And that might mean giving yourself the permission to redefine who you are, or to leave an identity behind and choose a new one. And that might be giving yourself permission to forego security, as the rest of society knows it, and step into the unknown. And to proactively put yourself into a position of creativity every day, working on the things that you're passionate about. I hope that I can't give you that permission, but I hope you'll give it to yourself. So, and to give you a little taste of what my daily life looks like, I thought we would tie some knots. I don't know how we're doing on time. Actually, we don't have very much time yet, so I'm just going to teach you one knot. You guys all have a postcard on your tables for the rope candy knot, so you don't need that one anymore. I'm sorry. You all have a postcard on, so take that one with you and use the short, fat piece of rope to tie your rope candy later. So what we're going to do now is and Gary is our lovely rope hand model. So I'm going to move ahead 2 slides. So what we're actually going to learn now is the donut knot. And I thought that would be appropriate since this is such a snack-obsessed conference, and we've all got donuts in our bellies right now, and I know Jesse likes donuts. So I thought we would tie the donut knot. It's not the easiest one in the world, and I never taught it to this many people before, but we're going to try. So the first thing you want to do is hold the knot in your left hand. So this is, the rope in your left hand. So this is 8 feet of rope. You're going to hold it in your left hand, in your palm, with the short end pointing up like an inch or 2. Is that working? All right, that's great. So you want to hold it like this, and you're going to see one length of rope running down your palm. Now for men, I want you to run, to coil the rope 3 times around just your 3 fingers. If you're a woman, you can probably use all 4 fingers, like your whole palm. So you're holding the rope, right, and you want to do it like that. So when you're done, you're going to have 3 pieces of rope right in front of you on your palm, and the long end is going to be going up in the back. Always look at your neighbor to see if you're getting it. Okay? All right. So now you're going to use your thumb, your left thumb and forefinger to lift. You're going to lift the coils off of your fingers and then just hold them with your left thumb and forefinger. Yeah. Yeah, excellent. So you're going to have a pretty small knot, like it's, small circle. It's going to be like maybe 2 inches across at most. So you're going to have the long piece of rope coming out the back. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it. We're going to wrap the long end clockwise around the short end like a little scarf. So you're going to wrap it around the front of the short end, around the left side, the back, and then you're going to bring it around to the front. Does that make sense? So you want to do it again? Okay, so you're holding the rope in your so you're holding the rope in your left hand with the little guy pointing up, right? So you're going to take the long end with your right hand and you're going to wrap it you're going to bring it around the front of the short end, the left, the back, and the right, like a little scarf, clockwise. So you're going to wrap exactly. I'm watching some people getting it. I'm glad. Seeing that? All right, and then you're going to bring it around to the front. And you're going to pull that rope through the circle and to the back. That's the hardest part, guys. You made it through the hardest part. All right, so now we've made one little teeny coil. So now we're going to make a ton of coils going all the way around the donut clockwise. And you want to make them pretty snug. And I find that it's often helpful to kind of hold or pinch the last coil that you made, and that kind of holds all the other ones in place. So keep pinching the last one you made. And so it's a lot of this. It's a lot of this with the hands and pulling the ropes through. And so you're going to go all the way around. Any questions? All good? Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little history about this knot while you're coiling all the way around. Try to keep them snug. So one of the families of knots are called the heaving line knots. Heaving line knots are super cool. So in ye olden days, when a sailor needed to get a bunch of rope from ship to shore, you can't just throw loose rope, right? So they would tie what were called heaving knots, which are very dense knots that get a lot of rope into one place, and it makes them throwable. So there's a heaving line knot. So cool. Yeah. I know, it takes a long time when it's your first time doing the knot, but good job. So when you start getting close to kind of closing the circle, push all the coils against each other to kind of free up more space because you want them really nice and tight.
How fast would sailors do this?
I can do that in under a minute. How about that? But sailors would be doing it with like crazy bad on your hands manila rope, right? An inch thick manila rope. You got to do it with gloves or you're going to get calluses.
Can you show us?
What?
Can you do it in under a minute for us?
Yes, I can. But no, time's up. Time's going away. Time's a ticking.
You have a minute.
Can't do it. No,
I
can't do
grant
it.
you a minute.
No. Oh my God. I'll finish. I can finish Garrett now. See me later for that. See my YouTube channel. Oh my God, Jesse.
Start the timer.
Do it. Should we do it in the camera together?
You can take over now. I'm done.
Okay, maybe not a minute. How's everyone doing? Any questions? See my notes? It's the donut knot. But the family that it belongs to is the heaving line knot, so heaving, a knot that's throwable.
So throw it at our neighbor, is that what you're saying?
Should I be here? Is that good? Okay. Oh my God, you guys, I'm not doing it that fast. Shit. I know. Oh. Did you finish?
Yeah. Or you just want to take mine and say
Yeah, I
you did it
kind
in
of
a
just
minute?
want to take yours.
Let's do a
Jesse, are we doing okay for
sleight of
time?
hand switch.
No. Totally. I've never had to make knots for an audience. I can't do it. This one keeps coming out. Some of you are probably having the problem that I am, which is that your little short end is coming out of its little looped collar. Just stick it back in. All right, so some of us are probably getting close to being done. Make sure that your coils are nice and tight, and feel free to keep pressing them against each other to free up a little bit more space because you do want a tight coil. All right, so when you get close to being done and you can't coil anymore because you've run out of space, this is a really janky version of it, but you're going to look at the knot from the top, right? And you're going to see the little collar that's around your. You're going to see there we go. You're going to see the little collar that's around your short end. Does that make sense? You're looking at the little scarf. And so when you look at the short end going through that little scarf, you want to pull your long end through it the same way, so parallel to it. So for a lot of us, that will be pulling the long end from the back towards the front. Does that make sense? Yeah, you just push it through. Just push it through. And then when you've done that, I didn't tighten mine up, but I don't know, was that a minute? That's the donut knot. That's the donut knot. Totally can't see what we're doing. That's the donut knot. So yeah, if you did it right, it's nice and tight and it's not going to come apart. It's incredibly strong and you can throw it. So yeah, that's the heaving line knot. Donut knot. Low fat, low cal. Thanks, everyone.